guys? Welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Stephanie and I'm a 29-year-old mother to two little boys. One is 4 and one is 2. And this is going to be contributing to my Real Talk Tuesday series. And I'm going to be talking about the differences, similarities, and pros and cons to being a stay-at-home mom versus a working mom. I first have to show you. I'm drinking my second cup of coffee today and my mother-in-law got me this super cute mug for Christmas with pictures of my boys on it. It's so sweet. I just think it's so cute. I love these little like sentimental things. Like, I'm never getting rid of this cup. It's so cute. Such a cute idea. I will just jump right into this. I also do first want to say that I somewhat apologize because I feel like for a long time I really didn't want to make this series solely based on being a mother and motherhood, but it just so happens that that's the season of life that I'm in. That is much of my life. I am a 24-hour, 7 days a week stay-at-home mom, so it's a lot of my life, so it's a lot of what I have to talk about. I don't have a list of any sort of topics to hit or anything like that. I just want to talk about my experience being on either end, whether it was being a stay-at-home mom or a working mom. I've been a stay-at-home mom since September of 2018. It is now January of 2022, so it's definitely been a while. I was a working mom from November of 2017 up until September of 2018. So not really a heck of a long time, and there were definitely things that led to me having to stay home, things leading up to me staying home in general that then led to me staying home indefinitely. If you guys know about my car accident I had a few years back, that was pretty much what led me to staying home. But I will first say that there is a lot of discrepancy over which is worse. A friend of mine said a phrase today that like really stuck with me, and it's honestly just so true when it comes to working and being a mom, like separately. Being a mom is harder than going to work every day. I will say that much, and I truly believe that. And I think any mother can really truly believe that as well. And I don't necessarily mean being a stay-at-home mom. I mean being a mom in general is harder than just getting up and going to work every day. It really truly is. That is whether or not you stay home full-time or go to work full-time, part-time, whatever the case. And I only wanted to preface my thoughts on that just because I'm not saying in any way that either way is harder than the other. So when I was a working mom, I worked a night shift. I worked from 3:45 in the afternoon until 12:15 in the morning. I was on opposite shifts of my husband. I only had one child at the time. I was home for 3.5, almost 4 months after I had him, because I think I went back November 1st, and it was difficult. Number one, the biggest thing that was difficult for me going back to work was feeling like I was missing out. I think the one thing that sucks about this glorious country that we live in of America is that we are really not given ample amount of time to spend with our tiny babies or to even recover from the very traumatic event that is childbirth and post-childbirth, whichever way you birth them. It's not just like something that you bounce from back mentally right off the bat. A lot of people do. Most people don't. I felt like going back, first of all, I wasn't ready. Would I ever have felt really ready? I don't know. I can't say because I wasn't given that opportunity to really discover that for myself. But that's hard in it of itself, is to muster up like being ready to be away from your kids when initially you have a baby and then you're with them 24/7 up until like your allotted time is up. So that in itself is hard. Whereas being a stay-at-home mom, you don't have to anticipate that. You know that you're home. So that's definitely one thing that's really hard being a working mom in comparison to being stay-at-home. Another thing with being a working mom, I felt like I was missing out on everything. When I would go on my breaks to pump and chat with my husband, it didn't matter what was going on in the background, whether or not my baby was having a full-blown meltdown. I felt like I was missing out on being there to try to help the situation, try to diffuse the situation, try to just relax him and comfort him, because I was still the best person at that point who was able to do that. So I felt like I was missing out on that. And then there was the polar opposite. When I'd be on the phone with my husband and I hear like giggling and laughing and playing and just like listening to them interacting, and I felt like I was missing out on that. I feel like I was missing out on the good and the bad that I would have just preferred to be there for. This is also stemming from somebody who kind of just always dreamed of being a housewife. So this like I said, this is just my personal point of view from what I've experienced and kind of how my mind works with all of this. And then of course, when you're a stay-at-home mom, you're kind of the only person who gets to witness everything at all times, which is honestly great. I am very, very happy that I am able to do that. And I'm such a control freak where I even have the tendency to like try and want to and actually go forth to like jump in into few situations, even if like somebody else is here to do so and like I don't necessarily need to. I feel as though I want to, and I do, and I need that in my life. Another thing with going back to work is the overwhelming of feeling like you have 2 jobs. I know for our situation, when I was working, my husband and I really tried to divvy up like the household responsibilities as well as like having to go to work, because both of us worked a full-time job and it's only fair that the home duties becomes both of ours equally. However, things just didn't always work out that way. You couldn't predict day to day how like baby was gonna be, how the day was gonna be, to like try to stay on top of things. So not being able to be home and on top of what I need of my home to be very level was hard as well, because what ended up happening was the weekends, instead of being time for family and togetherness, became time for batting down the hatches and cleaning the house, which got stressful and became kind of like an addition to the separation that my husband and I kind of felt, because there was never really any of bonding time or relaxing time together, because when we were physically together, which was only on the weekends, we were still just buried in responsibilities. This is, you know, for our situation in particular, with having opposite shifts and working, you know, one working day, one working night, could be totally different in comparison to parents who have jobs during the day together and then have like their evening time together. This was our situation. It was very difficult. And then there's childcare. So obviously when you have children and you have to work, you have to find people to watch your kids. We were extremely fortunate for the time being that my mom actually worked at the same place that I did during the day. So what would happen was I would just bring my baby to her, go there in the afternoon, she would take him home. And then when my husband would get home from work, which wasn't long after my mother did, my husband would pick up our baby and just bring him home. We were also like neighbors to my parents, which made things super, super convenient as well. Definitely more than thankful that that was the case. Not having to pay for childcare was a pro for us in particular in that situation, but I know it isn't the situation for everybody, and for a lot of people it's not the situation at all. And in comparison to being a stay-at-home mom, that is a perk of just not having to have that financial burden of, well, I'm only working to pay somebody else to watch my kid and raise my kid. And even without that mentality, it's just having the extra financial responsibility of having to pay for childcare. It's a lot. My camera's going to die, so if this shifts a little bit, it's because I have to change my battery. So to kind of go along with childcare and who's watching your child, another tough thing for me when I went back to work was just feeling like I'm giving somebody else the burden of my child. And I don't mean for a second that I felt like my child was a burden, especially to my mother, the grandmother of my children. My mother is an incredible woman, mother and grandmother, so I would never, it has nothing to do with that. It's more so of just like a mental thing of knowing your child's quirks and the things that kind of make them tick, the things that kind of throw them off, the things that kind of throw them into full-blown tantrums and, you know, things in that nature. I did feel sorry that my child, who at the time was very much attached to me, that burden per se was put on my mom and even my husband, who could not satisfy my child's needs and wants and desires in the way that I could, which in turn made it very difficult for them, which in turn made me feel even more guilty for not being there for my child. So there's a lot of guilt involved when it comes to going back to work for many things. Another pro of going back to work is kind of that social aspect for me, mom, you. One thing that I have learned and discovered of myself over the last year especially, like I said, this is now what, my 3rd year home, 4th, 3rd, I don't know what year we're in, I can't do math right now. I've been home for a little while now. I'm used to the stay-at-home mom thing. But as far as the social aspect, I'm very lucky to have some stay-at-home mom friends. I'm very lucky to have mom friends in general that I actually talk to on a daily basis that honestly keep me sane, to have some adult conversation throughout my every single day. Not everybody is so fortunate to have that. If you have the opportunity, I highly, highly recommend download Snapchat and have Snapchat conversations with your friends who are home, because That has been my life since being a stay-at-home mom, is just talking to my friends on Snapchat all day. We can get back to each other at our leisure, and you know, it's great. But what kind of sucks is I've been out of work for so long at this point that I don't really know how to interact with other people, like strangers. And I mean that in the sense of like, I don't know what's ahead for me. I don't know how long I'm gonna be a stay-at-home mom. I don't know what's to come of that. But I have sat here and like drove myself into like a pit of panic thinking about like, what is it gonna be like if I go back into a work field and I have to work with people and strangers and like customers, and I have been out of that for so long that I don't know how to handle that. I don't know if it comes off like being a YouTuber, if it comes off as you're very like extroverted because you're literally talking to hundreds, if not sometimes thousands of people. But like physically right now I'm talking to an inanimate object. I can see myself and that's about it. So that does not correlate at all with actually having to deal with people in real life. And being a stay-at-home mom and not being out in the world per se in that manner becomes a little bit isolating. So the thought or even the experience of having to go back out and do like normal things like that is a little nerve-wracking. I don't feel like I'm incapable entirely, you know, but it also just the fact that it scares me a little bit makes it harder to just be comfortable with doing anything but this at this point. So that's not really super great. I also have dealt with customer service jobs for much of my life, up until my most recent job was a factory job in which we were dealing with the same people every single day. We never dealt, in my position, with people outside of just like where we worked. You add those years, I think 4, almost 5 years on top of being a stay-at-home mom, to think of doing anything that I have to do with customers freaks me out a little bit. Also considering the fact that when I did work in customer service, I, as well as anybody who's worked in customer service, you deal with some crazy people sometimes. And I've had some specific situations in previous employments that I have had where it was like scary. Anything that seems scary or seems like it can turn into something very traumatic, I like avoid at all costs. But I don't want to feel like this is my only option if something else were to come about, or if I decide one day this is no longer fulfilling me, or whatever's to come in the future. But that is another unfortunate thing for me with being a stay-at-home mom, is just kind of like that isolation. Another thing that makes staying at home a little bit harder than going out and working in the world is, I kind of mentioned a little bit, is kind of like the isolation. Yes, I'm very lucky to have my friends that I talk to on a day-to-day basis, but I also, being an adult with anxiety doesn't help, but being an adult in general where all I really deal with is trying to reason with little tiny people who obviously don't have like the mental capacity to fully reason with an adult or understand an adult's reasoning, can get frustrating. And it gets to a point where I feel like I need a break from my kids, which then comes more mom guilt, because that sounds ridiculous, but it's also just very true, where it's like you just want to have adult interaction completely away from your children, just with adults. And it's funny, as much as I used to complain about like the drama that used to happen at my old job and stuff, at least it kept things like interesting, and it kept just, I don't know, that little bit of like normalcy outside of motherhood in my life, you know what I mean? So you lose that when you're home because there's nothing really else going on per se. The worst, I think, experience that I've had with being a stay-at-home mom is that of feeling like I have lost myself and all my passions for things. I don't know if this has anything to do with me extended breastfeeding both my children. I don't know if this has anything to do with just how difficult it has been having kids so close in age. I know people have had kids much closer in age. And I don't regret for a second the age gap between my kids. It's like the best thing ever. I wouldn't have wanted it any other way. But it doesn't come with a lot of ease. I also personally have dealt with, my youngest took 21 months to sleep in his own bed. He just turned 2 yesterday as I'm recording this, and he still nurses. But there's just been a lot of nothing is for me, and like nothing of myself is just mine. And having kids close in age, you don't really get much of a gap to have you to yourself. And with that happening, makes it really easy to then lose yourself. I feel many times that I feel the main thing that gets me is that I feel like I don't really have much of a passion for anything. And I could still say a passion of mine is being a mother and trying to be as exceptional as I can be in my motherhood and this journey that I'm on in mothering, parenting. But again, that's something that's not just for me. I used to have a passion for singing, and no, not something to make like a career out of, but even just like, I would just like to sing and post me singing, or even just like I would do things and listen to music and just sing along. And I used to really find a passion in editing. I love editing. I love toying with videos and editing and interacting with people who can relate to me. And not that I've cut those things entirely out by any means, but it just doesn't feel the same. And I think a part of it has to do with the fact that being a stay-at-home mom, I don't have the chance to do those things and just be able to do it and focus on just that and not get interrupted. So it becomes something where like those passions now almost become chores, because I have to figure out how to do them and be able to actually like wholeheartedly like put my time and effort and my energy and just my passion into it. It becomes something where it feels rushed, or it feels like I can't fully put my head in it to like get myself out of my head, you know, if that makes sense. And when I was working, I felt like it was easier for me to do those things. I mean, in particular for what I'm talking about, you know, the singing thing, I had a 45-minute ride home from my job, and whether I have a 10 minutes or 45 minutes, whatever, it was like that time in the car alone where I would like blast my music and sing my heart out, and like that was like a release for me. And then with YouTube and editing, I don't know if it's just because like, you know, with work you're on a strict schedule, you have to be at a certain place at a certain time every day for a certain length of time, that I just found ways to fit it in there. I mean, I also had one kid when it was easier so that could have played a part as well, but I don't know. That's another thing. And then the last thing that I can say that has been super hard as a stay-at-home mom is not knowing where to go from here. You know, when I was working at a job, that was just like what I was doing. And not that I didn't have other goals or aspirations, but like I was in a job where like I knew I could stay, I can build a 401k, I could build a retirement plan, I can have, you know, whatever insurance is, and just like be building that and have something steady in that way. Whereas being a stay-at-home mom, for me, your average stay-at-home mom that isn't like an influencer, though, like, you know, that's the big dream, no sponsorships or anything like that, you know, helping me along the way, I don't have that sense of security. Everything is put on my husband, which then comes like the spousal guilt on top of that, because sometimes you feel like, even though I know that essentially, and I'm not trying to compare or like go tit for tat, but essentially like my husband's workload is one thing and mine is everything else that our life entails. So not to say that what I'm doing is worthless or useless, because I know that's not the truth. However, there's still that spousal guilt of who's literally keeping us afloat financially, because as much as anyone could sit here and say, oh, money doesn't mean anything to me, it means a whole lot. It means a whole lot. And I don't mean for materialistic things, but we need to eat. We need to live, we need to have a roof over our heads, we need to have vehicles to get us from A to B, you know, and I'm not contributing to any of that, aside from doing like the inside work of all of that. You understand what I'm saying? So that in and of itself is enough to really kind of get you going on like, what am I doing with my life? And obviously, when I was working, I didn't feel that way, because my paycheck was contributing just as much as his to all of our needs and our wants. And that's actually something that when we first even discussed me staying home after the accident, I was home for a while after my accident, as it was because I was injured and I needed a surgery and all this other stuff. That was actually something that took me a really long time to be okay with and to just accept at that point, that even though my husband was the only one bringing in the finances, that it was still our money. And I still to this day struggle with, if I wanted to spend money on myself or get something for myself that like wasn't for, you know, the kids or the house or whatever, there was a lot of guilt. I felt like, who are you? Like, who do you think you are to spend this money that you didn't work for? And I know that's not the case, and like I said, I've come a long way from there, but in the beginning it was really hard. I'm somebody who has been working since I was 14 years old, and granted, I lived with my parents until I was 22, but I still learned the value of like working for things for myself. And though my parents were a huge help to me as far as like living and eating and things like that, you know, I was still very much independent from a young age as far as finances went, and I definitely couldn't really actually see myself like having to depend on somebody else's finances. And it took me probably about a solid year before I did come to the realization of the things that I just said, that just like, I know it's silly to think in that way or whatever. But even so, coming to that acceptance and coming to the realization of like what's true about when you have roles as we do, I still to this day feel sorry a lot of the time when it seems as if my husband is the one who's missing out on things with the family and the boys, or when there's something that we want or we're falling behind like financially, and I literally just like I throw my hand, like what can I do? What can I do? You know what I mean? Obviously the dream is like work from home. It'd be great to like make something out of this, and I feel like I've been trying and failing for many years, but that's besides the point. All in all, the taboo argument of being a working mom is harder or easier versus being a stay-at-home mom is harder or easier. They both have their tribulations. They both have their pros and cons, their ups and downs. Neither one is harder than the other. Like I said, what my girlfriend said, and she's gonna watch this and be like, I said that. What my girlfriend said was so true. Being a mom is harder than getting up and going to work every day. It's so true. And that's whether you're working or not. It's hard because no matter what you're doing, if you're a devoted enough mother, what it comes down to is that your being a mother becomes priority, and with that comes a lot of different difficulties, successes, achievements, downfalls. It's just hard in general. So my point of this was just to really get across that if you're a devoted mother, no matter what you're doing, and you're doing whatever you're doing because it's for the benefit of yourself and your family, I know it's hard. I know what you're doing is hard in so many different ways. I know it's great in so many ways, and just constantly give yourself a pat on the back, and don't let anybody tell you that you're doing any less than they are, because it's just not true. And people, yes, might have it worse off than you, but that doesn't mean that what you're going through is watered down in comparison. Whether you are working or you're staying at home, as long as you're doing what you need to do for the sake of your kids and your family, you are doing a stand-up job. Give yourself a pat on the back, buy the shoes, buy the earrings, do what you need to do for yourself as well as what you're doing for everybody else. And you are not going unnoticed. I notice you, I see you, I respect you, and I give you a million pats on the back because you really deserve it, no matter what mother you are in the workforce. So thank you all so much for watching. I'm sorry this was a little bit chattier than I expected. I guess I didn't really need notes because it just, honestly, this was something that I can say I've definitely been like passionate to speak on, because I think it's very vital that people who haven't been on both ends of the spectrum know that you really don't have room to judge. And even if you have been and the experience was either easier or harder for you, it doesn't mean you need to compare somebody else's experience doing either or. We all compare ourselves way too much to other moms, and it's just something we need to stop doing. And especially if it comes down to being judgmental because of it or mom shaming because of it. And that's the tea. The coffee. This is not tea. Thank you all so much for watching. I really appreciate you being here. If you liked it, please give this video a thumbs up. Also, if you're new, please hit that subscribe button. I would love to have you. Leave a comment down below of your thoughts, and we can have an open discussion. Any bit of interaction in my videos means the absolute world to me. You guys have no idea. Being able to get any bit of compensation for something that I really just enjoy doing when it's hard for me to do anything else really means a lot to me, and I can't explain to you how much I appreciate it from the bottom of my heart. So thank you again. I hope you're all enjoying your day, night, afternoon, whatever time it is, wherever you are, and I will see you guys very soon at my next one. Bye!